In one of the world's most ruined corners, where humans already pile misery on one another, the natural world, at least, still thrives. But now even this is threatened. Just off the coast sits a decaying oil tanker, ready to burst and destroy it all.
One thing we know for sure is that once the oil is spilled, it's game over. You've lost the battle.
We're about to map out one of the most frightening oil spills yet to happen. A spill 4 times worse than Alaska's Exxon Valdez tragedy. And we'll discover it's not too late to act. This ticking time bomb can still be defused.
This is one of the biggest environmental disasters that we can actually prevent.
Here in the Middle East, to the south of Israel and Egypt, is Yemen, war-torn and deadly, and stationed right outside one of its main ports is an old oil tanker called the SAFA. There's enough oil in it to fill 87 Olympic-sized swimming pools. Anchored in the Red Sea and now caught up in one of the world's most brutal wars, the tanker is moored in a spectacular location. At nearby Farasan Island, exotic corals line the coast. To the south, there are fragile mangroves on Kamaran Island. Yemen's main gateway for humanitarian aid, the port of Hodeidah, is a little further. Across the Red Sea, the natural environment is all at risk. We've seen this before. In 1989, the Exxon Valdez tanker ran aground in Alaska. Hundreds of thousands of seabirds died, along with sea otters, harbour seals, bald eagles and orca. The Exxon Valdez is still one of the most environmentally damaging oil spills. 11 million gallons escaped into the water and onto the land. It cost more than $3.8 billion to clean it up. 30 years on, there's still oil present. The United Nations warns those figures are small compared to their worst predictions for the SAFA, which could leak 4 times as much oil. The British government estimates it could cost $20 billion to clean it all. But the Exxon Valdez was an accident. The SAFA is an accident waiting to happen. Its story starts in 1976 in Japan, where an oil tanker is built. It's called the Esso Japan. 10 years later, it's bought by Yemen's national oil and gas company. It's given a new name, the SAFA. For 3 decades, it's moored off Yemen's coast. It's used to store oil. Then war, March 2015, the early days of Yemen's civil conflict. Rebel forces, the Houthis, take control of the waters around the SAFA. Only 5 crew are left on board. Barely any maintenance is done. The SAFA begins to decay. This year, in May, there's a leak. The rebels allow a quick patch-up job, but the ship is falling apart. 2 months later, on a diplomatic video conference call, the United Nations warns of an impending environmental and human catastrophe.
If a spill were to occur in the next 2 months, the experts project that 1.6 million Yemenis would be directly affected. Essentially, every fishing community along Yemen's west coast would see their livelihoods collapse and would suffer substantial economic losses.
So if it's going to be so bad, why is the oil still there? In a word, power. The global forces involved directly and indirectly on both sides of Yemen's war, the Houthis and their backers Iran, the Yemeni government and their allies, Saudi Arabia and the United States, have been unable to find a solution. And it is power that some argue is the reason why the Houthi rebels who control the waters around the SAFA will not give it up easily.
This is a bomb they have in their hands in the middle of the sea. This is something they can bargain with the Saudis. So I really don't know what their next move might be.
We've mapped out what is likely to happen if a major leak takes place now. What you're about to see is data modelled by a UK-based team, risk-aware, for the British government. In the first 12 hours, the oil travels fast, approximately 16 miles. The fish stocks Yemen relies on begin to die. By the end of this disaster, they will be totally wiped out. Within a day, they predict around 62 miles of coastline is polluted. And the following day, waters surrounding the port of Hodeidah are now covered, disrupting the humanitarian aid on which almost all Yemenis rely. Estimates suggest it will remain closed for half a year, doubling food and fuel prices. By day 3, the oil has hit the region of Mocha, famous for coffee exports since the 17th century. It now directly affects more than 500,000 people, and marine wildlife is struggling to survive. By the end of the week, the entire western side of Yemen's coast is suffocating. But every scenario is a disaster.
When we did our modelling, we separated it into 4 3-month periods throughout the year to try and take into account the fact that the seasonality in the data, to give kind of these outlooks for if it were to occur between January and March, it's going to look very different.
It's not only the worst oil spill in U.S. history, it's by far the largest.
Those who cleaned up after the Exxon Valdez spill, like this marine biologist, continue to push all sides in Yemen's war to do something.
We've got to grow up here and get real about this and find a reasonable middle ground where we can all agree that it's in everyone's best interest to get that oil off of there. If we don't and it spills, then shame on all of us.
But Yemen is a nation seemingly with no middle ground, torn apart by internal and external forces where countless lives have been destroyed.
The reality is that the Yemeni population cannot handle a scale of decaying tanker of the sky. They don't have the resources, they don't have the skills, they don't have the capacity. It's the duty of the international community to support them.
Only if that happens will a fully preventable disaster actually be stopped in time.
Hey, NBC News viewers, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here and click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.